welcome back. So we just finished covering running a user interview. All right, and so after you run the user interview, you're not done. There's some key things you need to document and to decide on. And out of those interviews, there's two major things that you should be documenting, and one is the persona. Okay, and this again going back to my persona rant from a previous video. Has nothing to do with demographics. It has everything to do with context. So I'm going to use Jocelyn as the name, even though this isn't the individual's real name who I had a conversation with over Facebook. But she is an agency designer, like I mentioned. So typical personas, there's usually a little bit of alliteration that goes on. So animated agency designer just kind of plays into that, but there's nothing fancy about it. It's just who's the person, give a name to the person and give some information that contextually matches who you talk to. Okay, so Jocelyn, the animated agency designer, person's name, she was female, so I gave it a female name. And then animated comes from the fact that she needed animations and she was an agency designer. So nothing mystical about personas, right? It just reminds me of who she was and her context. Okay. The most important thing is the problem. I had some very great advice from a very experienced product manager who said uh, product managers get so concerned about managing their feature backlog, features they could build and how do they prioritize those, that they forget about the problems that those features were meant to solve. And that it's more productive to create a problem backlog because features could get outdated. Features are just ways to solve problems, and those can get outdated or become irrelevant. But the problems never go away until you solve them. And I think that that's so beautifully put. And so the most important part of these user interviews is identifying the problems. And so the big problem that Jocelyn had was that she has to use and pay for another tool called Protopie to get professional level animations to finish her Figma prototypes. That's a big problem. And if there's workarounds or ways that they're currently solving that problem, I document those too as kind of an extra step, just so I can remember what they're doing and I can share that. It's not critical, but it's good to know and good to have and good to document if those workarounds exist, right? And so I just brought this in. I didn't copy and paste the whole workflow that they do, but basically just put that they're using Protopie to make advanced animations and then bring those into Figma. Okay, it might downplay the level of difficulty that workaround really is, but I can speak to that. And if you feel like you need the nitty gritty details, you can document those too. Okay, so this is one example of persona and problem that I document. There was another interview I did with a newer, less experienced UX designer. She's actually an intern for a startup. And so I didn't even do any alliterations with this. I just said who she was. This is her real name. She said I could use it. Grayson, the UX intern. And her problem was that their team uses different products outside of Figma for different aspects of their design process. This is problematic because Figma is built for collaboration, right? But graphic designs and animations are still being done outside of Figma. So again, animation, so it's brought up twice. So this really perks my interest. And so it's leaving Grayson out of the loop in those areas because she doesn't work on the animations. So she has no idea what her teammates are working on because there's no way to collaborate in those other products. And I think they used Adobe XD for their animations, if I remember right. So as a workaround, other products are being used. So Grayson has to do Zoom calls and screen share to stay updated with her colleagues' work. So now it requires extra tools like Zoom to get her job done and to be part of the team, which is kind of a knock, right, to Figma because part of their vision is to be the go-to place for communication and collaboration and creating designs and those things. So think about really salient problems in terms of, does this go against our mission and vision, and even our goals, right? So if we go back to the previous, right, um, they're paying for ProtoPie. Okay, it's the last fee they got to keep outside of Figma. So if I go back to my goals and I'm trying to say, how can I get individual designers or design teams of 2 who are currently using free Figma to upgrade? Well, animations have nothing to do with teams of 3 or more, which is how Figma's kind of prioritized their tiers. Their tiers for payment are around, if you're a team of 3 or more, then you get access to these different things. And if you're a bigger team and you need like design libraries and those kind of things, then you pay for those things. But if I'm looking for a way to get smaller teams or individuals to upgrade, well, individuals might need animations, right? So this is why it really perked my interest, because again, I'm trying to anchor things back to that goal and that mission and vision. And so as you go through these user interviews and you're documenting the personas and the problems, we're going to get into problem prioritization. But as a sneak preview, that's some of the things I think about as I go through this, and what really sticks out to me as I'm identifying problems, and why I drill into certain points of the conversation that I do is because I'm always trying to anchor back to my goals, my mission, and my vision. And that's what I would encourage you to do too. If there are interesting statements made by the users you're interviewing, and they relate back to the goals that you created based on your mission and vision, I would really press on those things. And that's how you create more impactful, generative user insights, as we're going through this process. So that's how I would explain personas, and problem statement development. Again, there's nothing mystical to it. You just want to have an idea of who the person is in their context, and then document their problems. Really, it's pretty straightforward. And if they're using workarounds, document those too. So nothing super crazy. It's pretty straightforward. Just to make it real simple, because it doesn't need to be complex, this is it. I've kind of teased before that there's questions that I'm going to be asking, right? And so as I've gone through my user interviews and I've documented problems, and I start, my mind naturally starts going to like, how can I solve this? The questions that should come up are, should I even prioritize this problem? Is this problem worth solving? And is this problem something that if I solve it will help me achieve my goal? Okay, so as kind of a teaser, that's the line of thinking that you should take into this process after you've identified the problems from your user interviews. And in the next session, we're going to talk about questions to ask and kind of the strategic mindset you should have going into the next step, which is in the next series of lessons around crafting solutions. We first have to prioritize, and to be able to prioritize, we have to ask ourselves some questions that once we answer them, we'll be in a much better position to prioritize the problems that we go and solve. So I'll see you in the next video.